What is up, health enthusiasts? It's Coach Lambie here for Working Weights LLC, your guide to strength, health, and all things nutrition. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Dwayne Ulrich, aka Poppy Doral.
Hey, what's happening?
And today, we are continuing on with our education on how to stop repeating social media. All right, Dwayne.
Yes, sir.
Moving on from last week, you ready to do this?
Yeah, last week was a challenge. I'm not sure I remember all my operators, but yeah, that was a challenge. But it was good stuff. It was good, and I was after our broadcast last week. I actually was trying to apply that to arguments or to things that I would read and say, okay, well, if this, then that, try to put it to practice. Not sure I did it real well, but I tried.
Yeah, so it's that's about as much as a person needs to learn about that. There is more. You have the truth trees. You can have how to create truth trees or tables. How to figure out how each proposition within an argument can either be true or false, and whether that leads to the argument itself being true or false or valid or sound, all that stuff. But that's kind of, the average person who's just reading some stuff on social media probably doesn't need to know all that stuff. So
Right. I agree. I understand.
So we're going to have a little less thinking cap today. We got our mind map. And so what we're going to go over today is we're going to do some logical inference. We are going to learn how to infer things and how other people infer things. And so before that, we're going to do a little refresher. All right. So we learned propositional logic last time. Propositional logics are statements, declarative statements that have a truth value. They can either be true or false, right? Propositions cannot be questions or commands, and they're indicated by capital letters.
Right.
We have these symbols called operators, which help us join propositions to create complex logical expressions or arguments. And we have our negation, meaning not P, or it is not the case that. We have and, or, implication, which means then, or this implies. We have our biconditional, which means if and only if, and then we have our conclusions or therefores.
Right.
And then we have our arguments, right? And arguments are a series of propositions where one or more propositions, known as premises, are presented as evidence or reasons, and another proposition, known as the conclusion, is asserted to follow from the premises. An argument is valid if the conclusion necessarily follows from the premises. An argument is sound if it is both valid and all of the premises are true. And then we have all of our examples here.
Right.
So, all right. Good enough refresher?
Yeah, can you make that just a touch bigger? I think it's going to be a little bit hard for people to see. Not a lot, just a little.
Let me see.
And I have new glasses.
There we go.
Thanks for noticing.
Didn't you have new glasses last time?
Yes. But I told you about them, so I was like, well. But that's for all the people that have just tuned in to watch us.
For those of you just tuning in.
That's right. Y'all check out Coach Lambie's low voice. Yeah.
My low voice. I'm catching a cold.
I rebuke that. I was going to say he's auditioning for a radio spot. Yeah. All right. Cool.
Yeah. All right. So today we are going to learn logical inference, and we're going to use our examples over here, and we're going to learn how these people were able to infer a conclusion based on the evidence they had, and then we are going to learn how to infer a conclusion based on the evidence they've provided. All right. So inference is the process of drawing conclusions based on available evidence and reasoning. We make inferences when we read sentences. Yeah. So we have three main types of what people would think of as logical inference. And this is kind of how we go about on our data. So we're going to go over these three, and people are going to be familiar with these as I explain what these are. And we use these in our day-to-day lives. You probably don't know that there are three different types, and you probably don't know when to use each one to find the conclusion that you're looking for, right? Or to answer a question that you're looking for. So to start out with here, we have deductive inference. And deductive inference is a top-down approach where we reason from general premises or general truths to a specific conclusion. Okay. And so that's kind of the key thing to remember for deductive. The premises are going to be general and the conclusion will be specific. Okay. And then a key characteristic of deductive inference is its validity. So if we go back to our argument section in propositional logic, an argument is valid if the conclusion necessarily draws. So when we were doing all of our exercises and we put in an argument and then a conclusion and our little calculator said it was valid, that's deductive inference that was being used there. All right. And then our definition for validity for an argument. And so an example of this would be the ground can only be wet if water is put on it. The ground is wet, therefore, conclusion, it rained. All right, so that is deductive. So these are our general truths. Okay, ground can only be wet if water's put on it. The ground is wet. A specific conclusion, it rained. Any questions on that?
No, but well, kind of. It's not really
Okay.
a question, but in an argument, I may be coming from left field, but I think you're going to address this in just a little bit. In an argument, that's not the only way for the ground to get wet.
Right.
So, but we're just making we're deducting the specifics that it rained based on what was given to us. So ground can only be wet if water's put on it. That's a premises.
Yes.
The ground is wet. That's an observed, that's a premises right there, premises right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so to say it rained, that's a valid conclusion.
Yes.
It's not the only conclusion.
The conclusion logically follows from the
Yes.
premises. So
yes,
it is
right.
valid. And then the inference, so the way the conclusion was drawn was through deductive processes.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Got it. Got it.
All right, we have inductive inference. So deductive, inductive. And this is a bottom-up approach where we reason from specific premises or specific observations, and we make general conclusions. And unlike deduction, induction doesn't guarantee a true conclusion. Now, in this one, if the premises are true, the conclusion is true. Right? In inductive inference, the premises can be true. However, the conclusion doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be true. And we saw that in our examples last time, right?
Right. Yes.
An argument could be valid, but not sound.
Right.
Okay. So an inductive inference strengthens its probability based on the evidence that it has. So inductive inferences can be strong or weak based on the amount and the quality of evidence supporting the conclusion. Okay. So something that people will be familiar with is when we make general conclusions about specific things. So if I have a basket of fruit and the first fruit I pull from the basket is rotten, and then I grab another one and that one's rotten, my conclusion could be this basket of fruit is rotten, the whole thing, right? So the conclusion logically follows from the premises, and the premises are very specific, right? So I grabbed a fruit, it was rotten. I grabbed another fruit, it was rotten, and I make a general conclusion about the entire basket.
Right.
Okay, so main difference between deductive and inductive. Deductive goes from general premises to make a specific conclusion, and induction goes from specific premises to make general conclusions.
Before you move on to that next piece there, I just want to say that this to me is more descriptive of all the arguments that come from people reading on social media. Because
This
they're
is
like,
the
oh, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, this is the main type of inference that people use.
Right,
So like we say, this could lead us to a conclusion that is false, right? So
right,
I make the general conclusion that all the fruit in the basket is rotten. That could not be the case, though. Some of it could be good,
right,
right? It also
right,
could be true that just those two that I grabbed
right.
happen to be rotten, right? So,
I gained a lot
so
of muscle mass because I drank Premier protein shakes. I gained a lot of muscle mass because I rode my bicycle twice a week.
yeah,
Therefore, so yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah. No, you're absolutely right. So inductive inference allows us to predict the future based on the past. And people kind of like the sun is going to rise tomorrow because the sun has always risen in the past, right?
Right.
But inductive inference can lead us to deductive inference has its own problems. Inductive inference has some specific problems that we need to be careful with. And so one, I'll start with this one first, even though it's on the bottom. I can use inductive inference to prove that I'm never going to die because I have never died in the past, right?
Yeah.
And then yeah. And
Woo.
then we also have this situation here called Goodman's Grew. So Goodman, I believe he was a philosopher or a teacher of philosophy or something like that. And he came up with this problem for inductive inference where grue is this substance that is always green before time t, before a certain time. And then after that time, grue turns blue. And we know that emeralds are green. All the emeralds that we've ever seen are green. And so emeralds hold the quality of being grue. So we could use inductive inference and Goodman's grue problem here. And inductive inference will tell us that emeralds will both be green in the future and blue in the future, right? So
Yep.
because emeralds are green now and they always have been green in the past, we have reason to conclude that they will be green in the future after time t.
Right.
However, emeralds are also characteristic of grue so that we can infer that they will be blue after time t. All right.
Right.
So there are problems. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
All right. Lastly, here we have what's called abductive inference. So, like abducting. This is a form of inference where we use the available evidence or premises to arrive at the most likely explanation. And this is kind of what doctors and detectives do. And a lot of people will use this in their own lives as well. Sherlock Holmes, very famously quoted for explaining abductive inference by saying, when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. So abductive inference focuses on finding the explanation that best fits the observed evidence, even if it's not necessarily the only possible explanation, right? So P1, you put your key in the ignition and you turn it on. P2, the dash lights come on, but all you hear is clicking. Our conclusion, the car battery is dead. Okay, so this is the most likely explanation as to why P1 and P2 exist, but it's not the only explanation. There are other reasons why that could happen, right? One
Yeah.
of those being that the starter is bad.
Yep.
So abductive inference, we can think about that one as kind of Sherlock Holmes,
Yeah.
elementary.
Yeah. Even if you wanted so even just looking at the Sherlock Holmes statement, if you go back, you can argue that because when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable,
Mm-hmm.
must be the truth.
Yeah.
Must
Yeah.
is a that
Must
that
be.
yeah, that declarative statement there is mm, that's grounds for a good argument right there.
Yeah. So there's a good example of this that's used a lot where you walk into a room, the door to the room is closed, and you walk in and it's your office or study or something, and the papers that were on your desk are now on the floor and the window is open. And the logical conclusion, right? So we go through a process of elimination in our head. We don't realize that we're doing this, but we're eliminating a whole bunch of possible explanations as to why those papers are on the floor.
Right.
And we come to, well, the wind blew through the window and blew the papers off the desk. Now, it's also very likely that someone could have come in through the window and pushed those papers off of your desk onto the floor, right?
Right.
But that isn't the most likely explanation given the evidence that we have, right?
Right. Right. Right.
You can collect more evidence to gather, right? So we could go to the window and look outside on the ground to determine if there are footprints or not. And that will lead us to, that may change our conclusion, right? So we walk in, we see the papers on the door, the wind blew it. We walk over, we look on the ground, there are footprints on the ground. Okay, well, now we have to eliminate that possibility.
Right. Right. Or if you have a curious 5-year-old, there's another possibility.
There's another possibility, yes.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
All right, so let's look at a couple of our examples here and let's see. Oh, actually, I have a couple here we go. I found some worksheets, some quizzes to do online. All right, so here's the question. Cactuses need only a limited amount of water. The new plant I've bought is a cactus. Therefore, I shouldn't water the plant too much. Inductive or deductive?
Inductive.
Deductive.
Oh man, that's right. Deductive was the first one we looked at. Top down.
So from
statements first, and then
specific. So the way to remember deductive and inductive, deductive goes from general premises to a specific conclusion, right? So cactuses need only a limited amount of water. That's a general premise.
Right.
We aren't talking about a cactus in specific. Now, the second premise, the new plant I bought is a cactus, is specific. However, the first one wasn't. And then the conclusion, therefore, I shouldn't water the plant too much, is a general statement.
Right. My bad.
I'm sorry, is a specific statement.
Right.
All right. The new plant I bought is a cactus. It didn't thrive when I watered it a lot. Therefore, cactuses shouldn't be watered too much. So premise one, the new plant I bought is a cactus. Specific or general?
It's general. I think it could be general because there's a lot of different types of cactus. But it sounds kind of specific because it is a cactus.
Yes, we're talking about the new plant, this individual plant, specific plant.
Yes.
It didn't thrive when I watered it a lot.
That's specific.
Therefore, cactuses shouldn't be watered too much.
Yep. Deductive.
Inductive.
No, inductive, because that's not a specific statement. That's right.
Yes.
Okay.
So from specific premises to a general conclusion. So I'm specifically taking the experience that I had with this specific cactus, and I'm applying that generally to cactuses.
I am bombing this.
My car's gas tank is empty.
Specific.
My car will not start.
Specific.
Therefore, cars don't start when they're out of gas.
General.
Okay. Do you remember which one that is?
Inductive.
Inductive. Yes. Gas-powered cars require gas in order to start.
Specific.
Okay. Is it talking about a specific car or just gas-powered cars in general?
Well, I would say gas-powered cars is kind of specific as opposed to diesel or, hydrogen or. Okay, so my noun there. Okay, it's not. It's more general because all gas-powered cars.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when we
So
talk
it's going to be
about, yeah,
general.
so when we talk about a specific premises, so we go back to the last two. So we were talking about a specific cactus
Right. Right.
and a
The new
specific
specific
car,
cactus.
my
The new
specific
specific.
car.
Right. The
Yes,
new cactus.
the
Okay.
new
Got
cactus,
it.
this one specific cactus. So when we say gas powered cars, so like you're not wrong in that it's specifically referring to gas powered cars versus electric cars or diesel or whatever else. But it is referring to a general category of cars,
Got it.
not to a specific gas powered car.
Got it.
All right. So gas powered cars, this is a general premise.
Right.
My car's gas tank is empty.
That's pretty specific.
Yeah. Therefore, my car will not start. Now, these are pretty good questions, so I really didn't look over these too much. So we have a general premise, we have a specific premise, and then we have the conclusion is general or specific.
Specific.
Specific. So really what we need to be focused with here, and these are, I think, good examples for the audience to learn this as well, is if one of the premises, if the first premises is general and the conclusion is specific, then you are going to be using deductive inference.
Right. What I saw in my mind was the from last week. As I saw in my mind, I saw the table, the truth tables.
Uh-huh.
And so that's what was popping up in my head was like, okay, that can be true. So that can be deductive then, or should be deductive because that's going to show up on that truth table. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. If it's deductive, it'll show up on the
Yeah.
truth table.
Yeah. So if you've got one
Uh,
yes, one no, then yes. Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah. All right. So all centaurs are half human, half horse.
I knew they were real. I'm teasing. All right. Half human, half horse.
General or specific? All
Uh,
centaurs.
all centaurs. I think it's specific
Okay.
because
Dave
you're
is a
dealing with
centaur.
all centaurs is specific. Dave is definitely a centaur, and that is very, very specific.
Okay. So in the
Yep.
first premise, are we dealing with a specific centaur or all centaurs in general?
Oh, you're killing me, man. So this is general. All centaurs is general.
Yeah.
Man.
You're almost always going to refer to a specific category of something. But if I'm referring to the category, then I'm referring to the general, not a specific. So remember, specific is going to be a specific individual of that category.
Okay. I understand. I think. However, I can tell you now, right now, this is going to be deductive because Dave as a centaur is that's a very specific statement.
Mm-hmm. And the conclusion, Dave, therefore, Dave is half human, half horse.
Right.
That's specific. So we have a general premise and a specific conclusion. It is deductive. All right. So let's go to our examples here and we'll see if we can figure out what they used. All right. So if we remember this one correctly here, the first sentence is actually our conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And the second sentence would be P1.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, this would just be P1, just be P or P, therefore Q, right? If you
Right.
can control what you eat and drink, then you can control everything else. Therefore, hunger is the first element of discipline. So what do you think they used? Deductive, inductive, or abductive?
I'm not quite sure.
So this would be
I think it.
deductive. So as we plug this in, this is a valid argument, right? And if it's a valid argument, then it used deductive logic. So hunger is the first element. So there are multiple elements of self-discipline.
Okay.
So I'm going farther into this than we need to, right? But I mean, I want to get to this point, but I'm getting there before we're getting there. So hunger is the first element of self-discipline. So the words first element would imply we can
There's more elements.
infer there are more elements.
Right.
So we are talking about a specific element of self-discipline. So the conclusion would be specific in this. So that would lead us to also find that this is deductive inference.
Man.
All right. Well, I thought it
If
wasn't
if
going
you
to be
guys
as much thinking.
if you guys make comments on this, you got to say, dude, you know, man, we love you, Dwayne, but bro, you should have more coffee or something. Just take it easy on me, man. Take it easy on me.
All right. If you're not vegan, have you considered that animals in sanctuaries are being rescued from you? So maybe this, do you think this will help if we put it back in the calculator?
I'm not sure. Let's go.
Let's see if this one will.
I think I need to review what abductive is.
So abductive. So to make an easy explanation for abductive inference, it would be that you are you would
It's the
have to be
Sherlock Holmes thing.
It's the Sherlock Holmes thing.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So an abductive inference would be presented more in the form of like possibly a question or a mystery.
Okay.
That's generally how people present an abductive inference.
Okay.
All right. So if you're not vegan, have you considered that animals in sanctuaries are being rescued from you? So for this one, remember, a question cannot be a proposition. So we had to change this question into a proposition. Animals are being rescued from you. So if you're not vegan, animals are being rescued from you. You're not vegan, therefore animals are being rescued from you. So if you, specifically you,
Specific, and animals are being rescued from you.
right,
Also specific.
So the conclusion is animals are being rescued from you. So specific animals or just animals in general?
Animals in general.
Okay.
I'm torn.
So if the conclusion is specific, it's deductive.
Deductive. But just animals are being rescued from me. That's not specific.
Right.
That would be general.
Right. So it would be inductive.
Inductive because, yeah. Because it's a general conclusion.
Yeah.
All right.
That one seems like it's a little bit difficult. Okay. So this might be a good example here. So BMI is useful, but waist circumference might be better for informing the future health risks. Having an elevated waist circumference doubles the risk for premature death, even when BMI is normal. So remember when I said abductive is going to be posed in the form of a question or a mystery or something like that?
Right.
So this would be a good example of abductive reasoning, right?
Yes, I think so because, yes, go ahead. Go ahead and describe it. I'm doing the Sherlock Holmes things, but go ahead.
Yeah. So, um, So BMI is used on a population basis for informing health risks, right? So a lot of health risks are associated with BMI, but the waist circumference might be better. So for example, I am technically overweight according to BMI. However, I have a waist circumference of 31 inches. So am I in the same health risk category as someone who has a larger waist circumference but the same BMI as me?
Yep.
Yeah. So then you go through the process of elimination, of eliminating a bunch of things to come to this conclusion. So this was the conclusion here. And so one of the things that we can learn from a lot of this and from our previous episode is that many times conclusions are presented first in social media posts, right? So this was the conclusion, the same as up here. This first sentence is the conclusion. And what follows, yes, what follows from it are the premises. Okay. So what we're looking at here are examples of how these people came to their conclusions. Right? So we have an example of deductive logic. These people use deduction to come to this conclusion.
Right.
This person used induction to come to their conclusion.
Right.
And this person used abduction to come to his conclusion. And so we can see that so as we plug these in, if you remember correctly last time, so this argument was valid.
Yes.
But not sound. Right?
Yes. Right, right.
This argument was valid. But not sound.
Correct.
And this argument was valid and sound.
Yes. Which is interesting because that's using an abductive reasoning there. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have through an abductive process, you can have a sound argument.
Yes. It doesn't guarantee that the conclusion. So a deductive inference, depending on who's defining the deductive inference, a deductive inference will generally lead you to a true conclusion, right? So it going back to our if our argument is sound, if the premises are all true in our deductive inference, then the conclusion will also be true. All right. And so yeah, so now we're getting to the second part of this. So we're going to learn propositional inference. So going back to our propositional logic. So we have 8 different laws of logic here, and we're not going to go over all of these, and it's not important for you guys to memorize them or anything like that. Just know that they're here. So the most common ones that we're going to use, what we're about to do is we are about to go into a couple of these examples that we had, and we're going to find out if the conclusion that these people has drawn is true without having to go and reference check stuff. Okay, so we're just going to use inference and reasoning to determine if some of these are true.
Make it a little larger, please.
Sure.
Thank you. Oh, too big. It's okay.
Okay, so the first one would be modus ponens, and this should look very familiar. If P, then Q. Looks like that. Right?
Okay. Yep.
So if P, then Q, P, therefore Q. So if it is raining, then the ground will be wet. So if P, then Q, it is raining, P, therefore the ground is wet.
Yes.
Okay. We have modus tollens. If P, then Q, not Q, therefore not P. If it is raining, then the ground will be wet, the ground is not wet, therefore it is not raining.
Yes.
All right. And then we have
Yes.
disjunctive syllogism. This is A or B,
Or B,
P
not
or
A.
Q.
Okay, cool. Go ahead.
Yeah. Not A, therefore B. So it can be either this or
Yes.
that. It is not this, therefore it is that.
Right.
Right? It is either raining or the sun is shining.
Right.
It is not raining, therefore the sun
Or the
is
sun is
shining.
shining.
All right. And so you have a few others here. We have simplification, conjunction, hypothetical syllogism, addition, and dilemma. Most people don't put their social media posts in any form where you would be able to use one of those laws of logic to determine if it was true or false. But know that they are there and you can look them up. All right. So let's go through this. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to use inference to determine if this conclusion is true. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to eliminate these sentences right here.
Okay.
So our premises. We're looking at only the conclusion, and we're going to turn that into a premises to form another conclusion. So hunger is the first element of self-discipline. So if we wanted to know whether or not that was true, we could use one of these laws of logic, modus ponens, modus tollens, or disjunctive syllogism, to see if it is actually true. Is it actually the case that hunger is the first element of self-discipline? Come on. All right. So I might infer something to say, okay, if hunger is the first element of self-discipline, meaning if I master hunger, that will necessarily lead to self-discipline, right?
Right.
So if I am hungry, then I cannot achieve self-discipline. Right? So do you think that from this statement, hunger is the first element of self-discipline? If I am hungry, then I cannot achieve self-discipline. Do you think that I can infer that next proposition that I just added?
I think you can infer it.
Right. Yes.
You
Based on the
can.
evidence,
Yeah.
based on the evidence that we have, hunger is the first element of self-discipline. So self-discipline requires some series of elements,
Right.
and the first of them is hunger. So I can infer in order to have self-discipline, I must not be hungry. Make sense?
Yes.
I don't have the other one with the conclusion. All right, that's fine. We'll do it without the calculator. Okay. So is it true that if I am hungry, I cannot have self-discipline? If I'm hungry, can I have the self-discipline to brush my teeth before I go to bed?
Yes.
Yes. If I'm hungry, can I have the self-discipline not to get upset when some bad situation arises?
Yes.
So we would say that this conclusion is false. It is not necessarily the case that hunger is the first element of self-discipline. One
Yes.
can still have self-discipline while
Yes.
being hungry. Yes.
Yes. Well, and the key there is it's the first element. It's not the only element.
Right. If you are not vegan, then animals in sanctuaries are being rescued from you. Okay. So the conclusion would be that animals in sanctuaries are being rescued from you. So if animals in sanctuaries are being rescued from you. Okay, so let's go back to this one. So what I did here was I used modus ponens to determine if that conclusion was true.
Yeah, P then
If
Q.
P then Q, right?
Right.
So if I am hungry, then I cannot have self-discipline. It'd actually be not Q, but anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So if you're not vegan, have you considered that animals in sanctuaries are being rescued from you? So even though animals in sanctuaries is a general premise, they're being rescued specifically from me, right?
Right.
Okay.
So you have a general and then a specific.
So either the animal that was rescued in Saskatchewan, Canada, is being rescued specifically from me in Show Low, Arizona, or it is not. Right?
Right.
So is it true that the beef that is at the local grocery store here in Show Low comes from Saskatchewan, Canada?
No.
No. So is it true then that animals in sanctuaries, as a general category, are specifically being rescued from me specifically?
No.
No. So I used an either or, right? So that was disjunctive syllogism to determine if that was true or false.
Right.
Right? So let's go to this one because we are going to continue using this one. So that's just wrong. I'm a neuropsychologist. The brain does not need dietary carbohydrate for fuel. In fact, dietary ketosis is showing strong evidence as a benefit to the brain. Furthermore, our bodies can generate plenty of glucose when we are in ketosis. So the conclusion here is
The
the
brain
does not
need
need
dietary
dietary
carbohydrate for
carbohydrate.
fuel. Yeah.
Right. And the brain, so these two words,
Which is general.
which is general, right? Because
Yes.
if I say the cow is a
Yep.
ruminant animal, I am not speaking about a specific cow.
Right. Right.
To the category that is cow, right? So here
Right.
we are talking about the category that is brain. So this is our conclusion. So the brain does not need dietary carbohydrate for fuel.
Yeah.
So
So
we
earlier I
are,
said that was specific, but that's not. That's general.
Mhm.
So specific
And
neuropsychologist,
if
dietary
the,
ketosis showing strong evidence. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. My bad.
yeah, if the conclusion is general, then it's inductive. If the conclusion is specific, it is deductive. All right, so the brain does not need dietary carbohydrate for fuel. So we can use logical inference to determine whether or not this is true. All right. So I don't have the picture of it up here, but I used modus ponens to determine if this conclusion was true. So the brain does not need dietary carbohydrate for fuel. So we can infer from that if the brain does not need dietary carbohydrate for fuel, if it doesn't, then at no point in a person's life, from birth until death, will the brain require dietary carbohydrate for fuel. Right? We
Yes.
can
That's a correct
logically
statement.
infer that from
Yes.
the evidence she's given us here.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
So is it true that at no point in time during a person's life, from the moment they are born until the moment they die, does the brain not require dietary carbohydrate?
Okay. So I'm afraid that you're throwing me a knuckleball. but I'm just going to say from this statement, then that could be a true statement. However, that's just not true. You do need some carbohydrates for fuel.
At some point in a person's
in your
life,
lifetime, yes,
specifically very, very early in a person's lifetime.
Yes, you will need carbohydrates for fuel.
Right?
That's a fact.
Maybe the first developmental stages.
Right.
Right. So the conclusion that the brain does not need dietary carbohydrate for fuel, just on logical inference, cannot be true.
Right.
All right. So I used modus ponens to determine that the conclusion was false, and that allowed me with confidence to challenge someone who is a PhD in neuropsychology. Right? So she made this claim, and I asked, citation? What is the evidence for this, please? I don't know if we should continue going down this. I think we should.
Okay.
Okay. So what she responded with is, you can find plenty of information here, which was a general search in PubMed. And if you were to click on that, it would just lead you to the search bar PubMed, and it would say ketogenic diet.
Right.
And so I came back. Okay. So before we go into that, so ketogenic diet. So the claim here is that the brain does not need dietary carbohydrate, right? So the brain can survive with 0 dietary carbohydrate. What is the evidence for that? Ketogenic diets. Now, is a ketogenic diet necessarily 0 carbohydrate?
No.
Right.
No.
So then I asked, what is the evidence a person could spend their entire life without dietary carbohydrates and not experience any adverse brain consequences? A ketogenic diet does not necessarily mean 0 dietary carbohydrates. And so then we get the response. I
pointed you to PubMed. I don't argue.
I don't argue. Ever. Which is funny because what is this?
It's an argument.
It's an argument. Interesting. So if someone, this is going to lead us into our next episode. So if someone puts out an argument that is a little bit extreme and might be a little hard to defend, and when sufficiently challenged on them, retreats to a position that is less extreme. Do you remember what that's called?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. I was reading your response down there to her.
Oh,
my bad. So say the question again.
So if a person first puts out a position that they hold that might be a little bit extreme and is a little bit hard to defend, and then when sufficiently challenged on it, right, they retreat back to something that is a bit less extreme and a little bit easier to defend and might be a little bit considered more agreeable. You remember what that's called?
No, I don't. I call it crawfishing, but it's like
it's called the Moat and Bailey fallacy.
Oh my gosh.
A logical fallacy, right? So
yes.
Initially a strong position was put, and then when sufficiently challenged, retreated back to something else, right? I don't argue. I won't ever, and I start now. Let me see. I guess I don't have the rest of it. I'll have to screenshot the rest of it. I'll have to screenshot the rest of it. So what this then led into is I had my response, and then she came back with, well, I just feel better on my diet, eating 20 grams of carbs a day or whatever, blah, blah,
she
blah,
said
blah,
that?
blah.
She said
that. Yes. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is called an argument from anecdote or appeal to anecdote. And this is going to lead us to our next episode, next time, which is going to be logical fallacies.
I got to ask one question though.
Go ahead.
This whole statement that she made is arguing. So somebody posted something before this, and she goes, "That's just wrong." Oh,
yeah.
then
So
she's arguing.
The American Diabetes Association, some lady put out a post, telling people that you don't have to necessarily stop eating carbohydrates if you're diabetic. Your brain runs on glucose, blah, 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 blah. And so then Alice Clearman here posted this, and that kind of led us down the trail. So all of that to say is that I'm not a PhD in any of this at all whatsoever, but being able to use propositional logic and logical inference, I was able to very quickly, just infer from her statement what the logical entailment, right? Or taking this to its logical conclusion here, and whether or not that was true or false. And then I have the confidence to sufficiently challenge her on her position. And what you get from the PhD then is a rundown of logical fallacies.
Yeah. And then points you to PubMed.
Yeah. So
bless her heart.
Bless her heart. This was a fun one. You liked my response to her?
I did. You should probably just read that out loud because I loved it.
Yeah, so I said, you pointed to diets containing carbs. If you know of a trial of a zero carbohydrate diet within the scientific literature, I'd like to see it. If not, you're making unsubstantiated claims on the internet, and it might be best if you were less vocal. I'm not that harsh with everybody, but this woman is a PhD, right?
Yeah.
And she's using that PhD to try and what's the word? Well, to try and argue with the recommendations coming from the American Diabetes Association.
Yeah. Did you read the paragraph above that? Did that come before or after you're pointed out to data? I think this came after.
This was, yeah. So there's one missing in here where she said that she doesn't make unsubstantiated claims on the internet. So supposedly she would have evidence to support her first position, right?
Right.
Which is what I was asking for the whole time.
Right.
And if I were to make a claim, I'd be like, here you go, here's the evidence. But what I got from her is the search bar of a search engine.
Right.
Yeah, so there's something in before that that's missing, and basically was her saying, well, I don't make unsubstantiated claims.
Yeah. I like this part right here. Can you provide evidence, or can I get a concession you can't substantiate your claim?
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yep. So ladies and gentlemen, just because somebody has a PhD in something does not mean that they know what they are talking about.
Yeah. So much of what we run across, and I apologize for my poor performance today, guys, but so much of what we run across on the internet, especially in the social media context, somebody makes a statement or they give a premise, and then if you just ask what he did, like in that one post there, citation, and then they start floundering because they really don't. A lot of times they just really don't have it. And like this lady just fell back on her PhD, and I don't argue. And you are arguing right now. So maybe she skipped that part in her doctorate program, but just saying. So we see a lot of that. That's the thing. So when you just ask somebody, can you prove it? Where's your citation? Where'd you read that? Well, Billy told me over a beer that we,
Yeah. And not that you have to request evidence because you're trying to start an argument or something, but maybe they do have it, and just because you use some logical, some formal logic, and you came to a conclusion where their premises or their conclusion could not be true, doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't.
Yeah.
All right. So again, as we go through and we evaluate the conclusions made by these people, and we're using deductive inference, and we're using inductive inference and abductive inference, and we're using all of these modus ponens, modus tollens, disjunctive syllogisms, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to come to a true conclusion. All right, so our refresher here. So we have propositional logic, which allows us to formalize someone's argument, okay? And we can determine whether or not an argument is valid or sound. And we're really looking for soundness. We want all of the premises to be true. We want the conclusion to follow logically. And then we can use logical inferences to determine whether or not the conclusions that these individuals have drawn are more likely to be true or less likely to be true.
Right.
All right. So that is that. Next week, we are going to get into logical fallacy, and that will about wrap it up for the formal, informal logic side of this thing. And then we will learn how to actually go and do research and read a paper.
Cool. Excellent.
And then using all of that, you guys can be more informed, be more capable, and more able to look at something online or look at something in a book and determine whether or not what that person is saying is true or false. And then if you so feel inclined, you can challenge them. All right. So
in layman's terms, for the everyday ombudsman, that means, does it hold water?
Does it hold water? Yeah.
Does it hold water? That don't hold water. So there you go.
All right. So some of this stuff, you have to do it a little bit. Once it clicks, once it turns on, it's very easy from there. So I'll try and link that quiz, that worksheet. You guys can look stuff up online on your own. I hope someone's mind was blown today.
Mine certainly was.
Hope you guys take something from this, and we will see you next time. Coach Lambie and Dwayne out.
See ya.
Now that we got that out of the way.